Radio Retro Future.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bonsard of Radio Retro Future with another rant on writing. And today's topic will be pacing and world building. But before I continue, I must invoke the YouTube algorithm by saying please like, comment, and subscribe. And also, this is a very special day in that regard, that on this last day of the month, as I record this on the 31st of January, we reached 100 followers on our Kickstarter. But before I go off and bore you with that, I'm gonna leave that for the end of the video. And oh yes, it's gonna be a lot. I have to tell you about that. I'm really getting hyped for this campaign. So, pacing. On our Discord, I have several threads dedicated to writing, in particular for people who are new to the craft of writing and who need some support. And one of the things that we do is we allow people to submit a single scene, or we allow them to submit a bunch of sentences. And the reason why I do that is that 5 sentences basically tells you everything you need to know about a writer's ability. You have to learn how to construct a sentence, and there's a couple of rules that I discuss in an article I once wrote, How to Write a Sentence. If you're new to writing, please check out that blog on how to write a sentence, because one cardinal rule I have for a sentence, and I learned this from comic book artists, by the way, and I'm very surprised that not more writers are woke on this concept, is that every sentence in a book should be able to be translated into either a comic book panel or a shot in a film. And I've talked about this before, and certainly in regards to perspective. It's very simple. When you ask a comic book writer how do you describe a panel, well, it needs to have a single action. And let's say fight scenes, characters are doing only one action each panel, like one punch, one kick, one throw. You know, if a character's picked up, picking up is a panel, being thrown is a panel, and the same goes essentially for sentences as well. If you add more actions in one sentence, it just becomes a mess. It becomes unfollowable. I mean, there is a way to do it, and I described this in the article that I just mentioned, but there is a very specific way to do so. There are rules to that. Now, so you've got the character doing an action, and you've got the object that is acted upon, which is, like, let's say a character is picking up another character. The character is then throwing the other character, or the character is picking up the rock, then the character is throwing the rock. You know, so I describe it in the article as the subject and the object that is acted upon, or simply the object. So if this is all new to you, I highly recommend you read that blog. And that's very often not talked about. It's not very sexy, is it? When I say, oh, I'm gonna talk to you about writing a sentence, you know, you immediately get the idea that you're going back to high school or something. And I completely understand that's not a favorite topic, but it is. The majority of your writing, the time is spent not on world building and thinking about character development. It's spent thinking about, how should I write this sentence? How do I describe this item? How do I describe this event? That is the big problem. That's the big challenge, and that is what you'll be doing. If you don't like that, if you're all like, oh, I don't want to do that, well, I mean, then you have to reconsider your hobby, because this is just simply the case. But enough. You talked about pacing, and I think that the pacing of this video is getting terrible at this point, but I want to get this through to you. And the thing is that when people think about world building, they think about, oh, it's facts. It's about this kingdom and that kingdom, and how this kingdom falls and that kingdom rises, and how this king gets assassinated and the warlord then rises to the top, yada, yada, yada. You know, it's about, you know, details such as, oh, numbers of regiments, and stuff like that, and oh, backstory. Oh yes, we gotta have backstory. We gotta know how the favorite flavor of crayon that characters like, all that stuff. And that is the problem, because when you do that, there is a good way of doing it and a bad way of doing it. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about my own work for a moment, because there is this odd consistency in reviews and reactions that I got to the Wrench in the Machine. And the Wrench in the Machine is far from perfect, especially in the editing department. But when it comes to the story into itself, I rarely get any complaints. It's very remarkable that no one ever talks about the story itself. They talk about either how wonderful the world building is, or that the editing is terrible. Those are the two major things. But there's another word that keeps reappearing in people's comments, and that is pacing. That the pacing does not, or that the world building doesn't get away of the pacing. And this is also, like in my previous videos, I talked about the difference between world building and world design. And when I talk about world design, those are your details, your geographical borders, the layout of the land, the succession of kings, and the architecture, all those details that are not related to the story. That is what I refer to as world design. The world building is more about, for me, and how I treat it in my stories, and this comes back into how you construct sentences, in my view, is about how characters are interacting with the world. For example, there is a difference between saying that a character enters a cottage and a character entering a palace. That right there, for me, is world building. Now, this is a very simple thing, of course, but there is a big difference between a character entering a cottage and entering a palace. And when you say, well, they're both buildings, well, yes, but the status between the buildings is very different. And that right there, that visual difference, and that difference in status, that difference in context, that is when we're talking about world building. There is a difference between saying that a character enters a blue room and a character entering a red room. Because we associate color with emotions, we associate color with mood. So when we say, well, the character's entering a blue chamber, then we immediately think about, oh, maybe something related to water, maybe something related to mysticism, maybe something related to magic even. And when you say it's a red room, oh, well, then alarm bells start going off, isn't it? Because red is the color of danger, but also color of passion. And it can be both at the same time. So we get a very different association there. What does red, why is red associated to me? I love, this turquoise and red combination. What does that say about me, for example? Answer that for yourself. And why would you apply such color combinations to characters? And the same approach I do to writing. A matter of fact, I actually experimented with this, and my short stories are very easily translatable to comics, because I basically write my novels as comics. So the transition is really easy. And why I say this is, when people are writing a story, they often write because they have this idea for a world. They have this wonderful idea for, I don't know, a war or something, And when they think of wars from the context of the world building perspective, what I refer to as world design, is that there are all these regiments and weapons and tanks and ranks and all this stuff, and you see that unexperienced writers who want to bring such worlds to life with propensity to then start name dropping regiments and ranks and events, and we need to mention the fallen comrades, and we need to mention the numbers of soldiers that are deployed, and those who died, and those who've got wounded, and yada yada yada. And the problem with that is, the moment you write like that, let's say your character is in a combat situation, and I've seen writers do this, where they have a combat situation, and it starts with, oh, the character's in this dangerous situation, and bullets are whizzing by him, blah, blah, blah. And then he... But now we need to talk about the regimental structure and where they are deployed and how they're operating and blah, 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 blah. And, the whole battle scene, remember all the bullets that were whizzing? Yeah, those can wait. We need to talk now about strategies used by the superiors, because, of course, the superiors need to be all idiots. So you start with a battle scene... And then you continue with a dissertation about warfare in your fictional universe. And then, then you continue with the battle scene, and then you give another dissertation about, I don't know, cafeteria food, who knows. You see how that does not really sound that exciting, does it? When you start with one thing, and then you lose track and continue on with another thing that's not even progressing the story, and... that is a big issue. And for me, I find it very difficult to find a good balance between describing objects and having the characters do something. And my first thing with the whole pacing thing is that your scene needs to have focus. I guess this is my point. When you have a scene that is about action, about a guy fighting for his life, then that scene should be about the action and the guy fighting for his life. But how do you deal with, all the lore and stuff? And I talked about this in various videos, that you need to earn, the attention of the readers, in a way. And, one way of doing that is, every sentence is action. Every sentence, the characters are doing something, or learning something, or developing, or resolving conflicts, or solving problems, and everything else, try to not include any white noise. And that means, name as little facts as possible, because that's one thing that I noticed with world building, that writers confuse facts about a world with world building. It's not. Facts are facts, and I often refer to this as, writing a fictional travel guide to a world that no one is going to visit. Especially not if your writing is not very appealing, as is the case with scenes that have no focus. People want to be able to focus on things. When they're in the action, they want to stay in the action and see it out through the end. You're not going to have a scene with an action star like Snake Plissken starting off wielding 2 Uzis, and then see him going on about, the minor grievances with text forms, for example. Another thing, and this is a little visual thing that a lot of readers gripe about, is when they see a page filled with text with no blank spaces. Those are red flags to a lot of readers. So if you have a text like that, that's just one square of text, you're likely to lose the reader's attention right away, because that's a red flag for exposition, as they call it. And that's my gripe with a lot of people who watch reviews and then think they know how to write, because they'll say things, I watched this critic, and he complains a lot about, exposition in dialogue, etc., etc. But then they start writing, and then they do the same thing. This is what you see a lot, where promote their world building, writer starts with characters having a dialogue, which is disguised exposition. This is the situation, and that character conveniently mentions that fact about the war or whatever situation, and then the other character reacts to that to be kind of like a counterpoint, or some pearl of wisdom or some observation about it, represents the writer's perspective on the matter. It's especially when you're an experienced writer or an experienced reader, you immediately pick this out, like, this is exposition. And to get away with that, the solution to that is to have characters actually have conflicts. There's the difference. When I write a scene, I do not think about, what part of the world building I want to expose today. I think in the terms of conflict. What is the conflict that is going to be resolved? If particular facts are required for the conflict to be resolved, let's say that, well, the character says, well, we want to do this with the harbor. And then the other character says, yes, but if we do that with the harbor, this and that union will become very upset. Is that what you want? And then they can have a conflict about how to resolve the conflict with the union, example. And then you expose the politics of that harbor area, but you also move the story forward. Every sentence should have an action. Every sentence should move the story forward. This could also include, a character coming to certain conclusions. The character is looking at something and then observe particular details, and then he draws a conclusion. Like, oh, this is what's happening, I need to act on this, or I disapprove of this. Something that is changing the state of mind or is propelling a character to do a certain thing. And this is hard. For example, the upcoming book Bound for the Sticks, the main character arrives at a new city, and this city is not like your typical, I don't know, suburban area. It's this whole special place that needs more elaboration on than usual because it's fantastical in nature, let's call it that. So there needs to be certain elements need to be lighted out, and you gotta make it feel cinematic. What I mean with cinematic is that imagine a movie and then a character comes out of a cave. Let's say that the character's an adventurer, dropped underground, is lost in a cave system, moves through the cave system, and then all of a sudden, let's say the character discovers an underground Shangri-La. And it's not a normal city like anything else. It's underground for one. And then you have to really move the character's perspective. So, he starts on the right side of the city and then moves, pans the camera to the other side of the city. And that is kind of like the effect that you want. So the reader has the sense that she or he is following a camera around the location, describing things. There needs to be a sense of movement to your descriptions. And I remember that this logo here, I needed to describe that in the book because, there are illustrations, so I can just have an illustration of that mark on the wall and get it over with. But, I also wanted there to be described in words. So, for it to make sense because it reoccurs in various parts of the book, I had to describe that, and I feel bad about that part because it really feels like the character moves into a tunnel, sees the symbol drawn on the wall, and then it feels, even if it's just 2 sentences, for me the story just grinds to a halt because I'm describing the chevron and the arms and the figure, the monk stylized monk-esque figure in the middle. And it just feels, to me, when I read it, I feel bad about it because it really feels, the story just stops because nothing is happening. It's just describing a symbol. Now, in this case, I could not come up with a better resolution than to do that. But, it's always hard to make every description feel like motion. And, one way of doing it is the character observed the strange circle on the wall. Then something is happening. The character is observing the symbol on the wall. There you go. And then you've got your world building and you've got your action, so there is movement there. And the next sentence would be the character interprets this circle to mean this, or something like that. That's one way of going about it. Or, you can just simply have, the character pulls the middle of the 3 levers down. And then you have your world building right there. There are 3 levers on the wall, and the character has the action with pulling the middle lever down. That's how I do my world building. I make sure that the characters are always interacting with the object that I describe. And it can be as simple as they're observing it, or they're looking at it, or they're gawking at it, Or, in case of like food, they start to salivate when they smell all the wonderful sense of I don't know, fried meat, whatever it is that they're smelling. That is, that is how you keep up the pacing. Like, and the reader might not even realize that you're building the world there. You're kind of, because they're constantly moving from one action to the other, and they get like a good impression. Like, the moment the character enters a room, she's attacked by the smoke of cigarettes. And those are details that build your world. That is where the lore comes from. I talk about this in my video, What is Lore, of the Steampunk Beginner's Guide. So, and that's how I keep up the pacing. But what about, all the details about, let's say, this is the colonel on the 16th Regiment. Well, it's very simple, actually. Just announce that character to be the colonel. Like, for example, let's say it's a fancy party and you have got like an announcer at the door, like introducing every guest, and the colonel comes in, and then the announcer says, "This is like Colonel yada yada." Colonel of with I don't know, 16 dishwasher regiment. Who knows? So that is, but there is an action there because now it's announced that this is the character. And it may sound like very obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people, how many writers, and I've seen this even in professional publications where they, have to state this at some random place where like, well, this could be done differently. So, and that's the thing with pacing. So I guess what I'm going to give you a way to conclude is always make sure that the story is moving. Always make sure that characters are interacting with the world. If you have a sentence that just says, well, there is a red building. Okay, try to imagine that there's a comic book panel, to come back to that. And then, okay, well, you just have a drawing with a red building, wouldn't you? Well, that's a panel wasted, and you're paying good money for those panels, by the way. So, when you're writing a comic, you better make sure that every panel moves the story forward. And if you have like such a quiet lifestyle image, make sure it's for a good purpose. I mean, it can be for, the first image. Let's say you've got a wide shot of the city, which gives an impression of what the world is like. And then you have like some exposition to quickly introduce, to quickly bring the reader up to speed. But then every other panel will be action. It will be characters screaming at each other. That's what a lot of comics do, where they have like the wide city of the large panel of a city or other location, and then they have a character not out of the shot but inside one of the buildings. Have a text balloon of one character shouting at the other. And that's for that reason, because now there's an action in that panel. It's not just a shot of a city anymore. And that is how you can also deal with writing. So, for example, your opening shot could be, from within the halls of Excalibur Palace, a boisterous voice shouts, "Where are my donuts?" For instance. There you go. You've got your establishment that we are in the halls of Excalibur Castle, and there is a guy over there who really likes his donuts. There you go. That's your world building lesson for today. Alright, I hope that wasn't too rambly. I think I covered much of it, what I wanted to discuss. It's a very complicated thing. It's not something you really have to practice. So, speaking of world building and successes, like I said, we have had our 100th follower on our Kickstarter yesterday, and I'm really pleased because that means for you, dear viewer, that we are now going to introduce a new miniature. A matter of fact, the people are already at work. The concept art is nearly getting done. I'm gonna probably post it on our community tab on YouTube, and of course you can follow us on Discord, where we also have or writing channels where you can get a evaluation of your writing thus far. Now, as for the miniatures, our first one is this. We have currently 3 in total. The 4th is currently being produced. This is a large version of Igraine. And yeah, this is still not done painting. I have not time yet. I have a conversation. Maybe I'll combine it with that tonight. And that's going to be a very interesting one indeed. That's going to be of great import to you. Now we also have our bookends. I'm going to request from my designer if he's willing to make other busts as well. But no promises there yet. Now, we also got the Arcology Companion, and the feedback that I've been getting on this has been incredible. Like, it's very thin. It's about 50 pages. It's some short stories that inspired my upcoming book, Bound for the Sticks. And at this point, it seems that people are more enthusiastic for the companion than they are for Bound for the Sticks. But anyway, the Bound for the Sticks expands on what is described here at all. And as you can see, it's fully illustrated with sketches that I otherwise cannot use, or things that I used in videos. Yeah, it's basically something, especially for you role players out there. If you're getting the miniatures for your role playing games, you can get this as well and straightly give to your players, because this is like in-game, like in-universe writing. This actually exists in the world. So, what I'm gonna do, because of the reaction I got in the first book, The Wrench in the Machine, there are files like this as well, but they're included in the book, which means they're just printed on white paper and they don't look as elaborate as this. So what I'm gonna do, and I'm pretty sure I will get it done in time, I'm gonna make a separate run for The Wrench in the Machine. Maybe I'm gonna throw in some bonus content, otherwise you have the same all the same stories twice. So maybe I'm gonna do some other stories I have not yet published in there as well. But it already looks like it's gonna be thicker than this one. So I'm not sure if the people who printed this can print the other one as well. But however, I'll be able to like include sketches and stuff like that. That is why I love this. I love sketch work, and I can include it. So yeah, I'm gonna do my best to get that done. Of course, we're also gonna have audiobooks. The Bound for the Sticks audiobook has already done. I'm still working on the Wrench in the Machine part, but like I said, I've been very busy. But I'm pretty sure I can get that done in the period when the campaign is running. And otherwise, I'm gonna put up a version that does not have the sound effects. So it might be cheaper. I don't know yet how I'm gonna exactly do that. But more importantly, I've been talking to a lot of people, other fellow creators, writers, and even musicians, in which you can expand your horizons with their fiction as well. So it's not only going to be my work that's going to be on there, but we're also going to do a collaboration of various artists so you can get their ebooks as well. And I'm going to do ebooks only right now. Because it saves us a lot of trouble with the distribution, and yeah, it's just gonna be cheaper. You know, it's a little extra you can get. Now, it's not hard to get the add-ons. There is a $1 tier. I'm not sure if we're gonna call it the empty crate like last time, but that will give you access to all add-ons, including all the miniatures, bookends, the companion books, well, everything that's in the rewards is also available as an add-on. So I'm gonna try and focus the rewards on a particular public. So for example, we have one that just has the Arcology Companion, maybe the Wrench in the Machine bundle as well, and the miniatures. Now for one story, which is not really a file, but I want to include it anyway, because the idea, I'm probably gonna call it like 321's Notebook. 321 is one of the associates in the Wrench in the Machine, so that's where the title comes from. Now, one other thing I want, like these books, the anthologies are purely community projects. These are just ways to get more funds for the campaigns for the series overall. So the editors are going to be members of the community, and you, if you want, can have your sketches included in there as well. They don't even have to be great. They can just be sketches. That's why I love these books. I want these to be, community made. And also, if you want, you can contribute future stories. I'm not sure how we're gonna do that, but I really hope to get more writers involved. Okay, I've been jabbering on for nearly 5 minutes now on the Kickstarter, so I'm gonna cut it out here and bid you adieu. And as always, make things your way. Good night.